Welcome to Distress to Joyful, Bailey's Way. I'm your host, Bailey Raber, here to enlighten you and the rest of the world about one of the most misunderstood mental disorders out there, bipolar disorder. Each week, we're going to learn more about my personal journey with the disorder while leaving you enriched with new information on how you can help better yourself as well as those around you. Hey everyone! So for today's episode, we're going to discuss the following. When depression hit me for the first time, what I experienced and how I handled it, how it affected this former straight A high school student, self-awareness revolving around depression, and what to do when you notice someone in your life start to slip into these behaviors, or what you can consider doing when you notice yourself start slipping. So when depression hit me for the very first time, so that was 100% after my boyfriend at the time, which let's go ahead and name him John for anonymity's sake. So remember how in last week's episode, I mentioned that when I told John about my recent diagnosis, that he had to, quote, think about some things before deciding if he and I were okay? Well, he thought about those things, and that led him to decide to break up with me. Yep, go ahead and cue the dramatic, sad country song centered around heartbreak. And surprisingly, I was a fan of country music at the time, which I 100% am not now, just for clarity's sake. So I actually did listen to tons and tons and tons of those sad breakup songs that country music loves to continue making, which only made matters worse. Y'all, I was young and he was my first, quote, real boyfriend, and I thought I loved him back then, which, looking back now, I realize how naive that was. But at the time, it was a really huge deal to me, and so I took the breakup really hard. I mean, come on, y'all were 16 once. Just imagine how dramatic everything was back then. Same for me, except exemplified. And I especially took it hard because I knew that his decision was based largely on the fact that I had recently been diagnosed with a mental disorder. So, what did I do? I stopped caring. I just completely stopped giving a shit about everything around me, about myself. I started sleeping a lot more, eating more, watching TV more, and spending a lot of time with my headphones in my ears, playing those super sad, dramatic country songs, especially while I was in public places, just so I could drown out the noise of others. I didn't want to be around people, which is super crazy to think, because if anybody listening knows me well, you don't even have to know me well. You just know me at all. You know that I'm extremely extroverted. So it's really strange that during this time, I just wanted to be left completely alone. And I later found out that these behaviors are known as self-isolation. And once you reach that point, it's really hard to come out of it by yourself. So let's go over how depression affected this former straight A student. Keyword, former. So I stopped caring, remember? That meant that this once hopeful, ambitious kid I was now turned into a Debbie Downer. And side note, sorry to anyone named Debbie, like my Aunt Debbie if you're listening, because your name, just like Nancy, is associated with negativity. Oh, and Karen. That name is also highly associated with negativity. So negative Nancy might not always be negative. Debbie Downers might not always be, well, a downer. And not all Karens are Karen-like. Although that last one's kind of questionable. But anyways, so my grades were affected tremendously during this time. So bad that this once all advanced classes girl, which all advanced classes for anyone who may or may not have experienced high school in America, you have two types of classes. You've got, quote, regular classes where just the average kids go. And then you have advanced classes, which is harder work, and they're called AP for advanced placement, and they can often get you college credit. So that way you don't have to take certain college courses because you took them at college level while in high school. So, back to that, this once all advanced high school girl was now in regular classes. Being in regular classes meant it was easier for me to make decent grades. Although my parents weren't very happy about that because they wanted me to succeed. I mean, all parents do. All parents, for the most part, want their kids to succeed academically. So if you're normally in all advanced college level classes and you get moved down to the regular classes, well, you're first of all going to be questioned nonstop by your parents, or at least I was. And then also they'll probably be a little bit disappointed, like mine were, because now you're no longer in the smart classes. Lots of sarcasm and air quotes around all of that you guys cannot see. Anyways, as time went on, I started to care less and less, and my grades started slipping even more. Senior year, I was in a normal English class. Mr. Roselle of Bradswood High School was my teacher, and I'll never forget him. But I failed 2 of the 6 week periods. 2 of them. So I don't know if they still do this in high school to this day, but I'm speaking largely to anyone who may not have gone to high school in America, like my Indian boyfriend and some of his friends. In high school back then, at least a decade ago, we had, of course, semesters. There was the first semester and the second semester. Each semester is broken up into 3 6 week periods. And so you get a final grade for 1 6 weeks, 2 6 weeks, 3 6 weeks. Then you have all of your, what do they call that? Like, I don't even know what they call that anymore. Like the exams that you take before winter break and before summer or before graduation. Wow, am I that old that I don't even remember what they called those exams in high school? Oh gosh. Anyways, there's a total of 6 6 week periods over an entire school year. Like I mentioned, there's 3 in the first semester and 3 in the second semester. And I failed 2 of those 6 senior year. So 1/3 of my grade for Mr. Roselle's class was failing. 1/3 of it. The other 4 6 weeks, I made up for it tremendously, so it evened out by the end of the year. But still, you get the point. And I know this is kind of flashing forward a little bit, talking about senior year, but this is the best example I can come up with the grades slipping and how it impacted not the best example for them, but just how it impacted me over a period of time. Because it wasn't just, okay, in the sophomore year they started slipping. No, they started slipping more and more and more to where my used to be all A's in all advanced classes now turned to failing, quote, regular classes. Something happened there, clearly, and that something was depression. So when I stopped caring, homework? Yeah, you can forget about that. Studying? No way. And paying attention during lectures and teachings? Definitely was not happening. Remember how I said I started sleeping more? Well, that started happening in class. I would sometimes even snore and wake up to the laughter of the students around me, which was super embarrassing, of course, and caused me to be even more self conscious than I already was at the time. So that was great, right? But spending tremendous amounts of time by myself caused a ridiculous amount of overthinking, which I will tell you right now that overthinking can be absolutely detrimental. I was so locked inside my mind and was creating stories in my head that were, mind you, not at all true, that I would sometimes appear to just randomly burst into tears, even during class, kind of like how I mentioned in last week's episode. But I was just hurting so bad, y'all. I was hurting so bad that this started happening more and more often. And then that's when I started spending a good portion of my classes, quote, legally skipping them in the counselor's office. I say legally skipping them because skipping class can add up to being illegal and then your parents get in trouble. But if you're marked present in the class and you leave shortly after you're marked present to go to the counselor's office, well, yeah, you skipped class, but you were still considered there, so technically nobody knows you actually skipped, except the teacher and you, and everyone in the class. Not that they cared, but anyways, you get the point. Real quick, I just want to say that I am really, really thankful for all of the empathetic teachers that I had, Miss Herrera being one of them. Because she often would allow me to leave her class to go to the counselor's office because she knew it was a safe place. Or at least I'm pretty sure she knew it was a safe place for me as an outburst of tears started to roll down my face. Y'all, kids are mean. You guys know this, especially high school kids. They're so mean. They talk, they spread rumors, and they make fun of each other harshly. All of my teachers, like Mr. Roselle and Miss Herrera, and especially all the other teachers out there who are also very empathetic and look out for the students, and not just look out for the students, their well being, but also their emotional and mental states. And knowing that if they can help relieve some embarrassment, then doing what they can to do that. So, so incredibly amazing. And thank you for that. Thank you, thank you. But so I just want to personally thank my teachers for doing this kind of thing for me and all of the other teachers out there for taking on this incredible role in society. I would never be able to do the job that you guys do, and I'm just so amazed by the patience and love that you guys just have for everybody else out there and for other people's kids. That's the hardest part. You guys don't just love each other and love people, y'all love other people's kids. I don't know anybody besides teachers who can do that. So you guys absolutely amaze me. And thank you for all that you do. But now I'm sure you're wondering, why did I stop caring? Why did I stop caring? Why did I stop doing my homework and stop studying? Why did all this occur? Well, that's simply because of the one ugly word, depression. Y'all, depression is a terrible disease. It takes over your mind and it tells you that you're not good enough. It tells you that you're fat, that you're ugly, that you're worthless, and that no one likes you. And it tells you that no matter how hard you try, you won't do any better. So why even try? It lies to you constantly, and you believe it. You believe that bullshit because how can you not when that's all you hear in your head nonstop? Like a broken record. Depression stops at nothing to hurt you and pull you down. And this is why it is so, 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 so important to consume positive media. Social media, TV, music, etc. Like you need to consume positive materials and surround yourself with positive, uplifting people. People who care about you so much that they bug the hell out of you when you start to disappear from them. And y'all, I'm very, very thankful for the current people in my life who regularly do that for me, who check in on me and bug me when they haven't heard from me or haven't seen me in a while. And I hope I've done a really good job doing the same in return to anybody else who has needed it. Okay, so moving on to some self-awareness around depression. I'm only going to briefly touch on this today because there is just so much content I could cover regarding this. But if you deal with depression, it's very important for you not only to see a therapist, but also to start paying attention to yourself, your habits, and your triggers. So, what triggers are, just to kind of break that down for any of you who might not know what that means. But a trigger point, I mean, if you think about like a trigger on a gun, you pull the trigger and the gun fires, right? So a trigger when it comes to depression is it's something that happens, whether it be an event or some small detail or something, just something that occurs that sets you off and you start to spiral down into depression. And triggers also happen on the mania side, which we'll touch base on next episode. But so that's what a trigger is. It's just the one little thing that happens right before depression hits. So when you start paying attention to yourself, you should start thinking about what events occur right before you start to get depressed. Is it a negative comment thrown at you by a friend or a family member? Is it jumping on the scale and seeing that you've gained 10 more pounds? Or is it disappointing someone close to you that hurts you so much you just can't bear it? Take the time to start journaling and thinking back upon the times when you were depressed and what happened right before you began to start feeling those feelings. It's going to take some time and work to figure out what triggers you, but guys, it's really worth figuring that out. Coming to that conclusion can help you work on preventing it from occurring later on down the road. So, I recently did the work and I discovered that one of my biggest triggers is disappointment. More often than not, it's directly related to disappointing myself instead of disappointing others. I'm an Enneagram 8, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the Enneagram, it's a personality scale, kind of like the Big Five. Us 8s on the Enneagram are known for being extremely hard on ourselves. So while an event might occur and others might be slightly disappointed in me, I am going to be 10 times more disappointed in myself. So let's get to the bottom of this. How did I come up with this conclusion? How did I figure out that disappointment tends to be a trigger for me that starts to lead to depression? Well, a couple of weeks ago, my boyfriend and I were in a bit of a rough patch, and he said he noticed a few things that I had been doing that he wasn't too fond of. I took that super harshly, which is not what he had intended to happen, by the way. So, because I took it personally, I instantly felt disappointed in myself for my recent actions. Cue depression. I was very down for a few days, but I decided to journal my experience at the time to work through it. Something that my therapist has been recommending for years, and something that Brene Brown preaches about. So, this storm passed, the depression lifted, things started to go, back to how they normally are for me. And then a couple weeks later, when my sewing machine broke in the middle of making a humongous batch of face masks that I sold to my local community, I had to refund my customers and tell them the terrible news that they would not be receiving the products that they were so desperately needing. While everybody was very understanding and even empathetic to me during this time, I was completely heartbroken at the fact that I had let these people, my friends and their friends who were referred to me, I had let them down. So, cue depression once again. But this time it came back with a vengeance. So I did the same thing. A couple days into it, I pulled out my journal and I wrote down my current experiences. I started from what I was feeling right then in that moment, and then I started to backtrack a bit. This time, as I was backtracking and writing things out, I came to a realization that what I was writing was very similar to what I was feeling and experiencing from the previous depressive episode. Boom! Light bulb moment. Except light bulbs don't boom, so you get the point. But, anyways, I now understood that depression finds me when disappointment is in town. So, what you could do when you start to slip into a depressive state, or when you notice someone in your life starts to hit that downward spiral. There's a couple things. While I now know what triggers depression for me, I can stop that from occurring. And by the way, guys, once again, you're different from me. We're all different from each other. So the disappointment that triggers depression in me might not be what triggers it in you. So in order to find out what triggers you, talk to your therapist about your experiences and start journaling them out. That's how I came to my conclusion, and that's how you can come to yours. So how I keep depression away from me is to keep disappointment out of town. I am the type that I have a lust for life. I love doing things, and I often overload myself because my eyes are bigger than my stomach. I think I can handle more than I really can. So I'll take on too many projects or too much work or too many tasks. That then leads to me not finishing on time and not doing a great job, or just plain not keeping my word, which leads to me disappointing myself, which then summons depression. See how that equation works for me? Maybe try something like that for you. But when you have a friend who starts to self-isolate, what can you do? Well, first of all, just reach out to them and ask them questions. And y'all, they don't even need to be your best friend. Just anyone in your life who you notice has kind of disappeared or taken a step back. Whether that be they've gone silent on social media, they've stopped texting you back, or they're not showing up to your workout groups or activities anymore, just reach out to them. Y'all, I will never forget. So a friend of mine, Lauren, LP, she reached out to me last summer via Instagram because she noticed at the time that I hadn't been posting much and it just didn't seem like me. Y'all, we hardly knew each other back then, but when she reached out to me, I was in fact depressed at the time, and it meant so much to me that someone noticed and that someone cared. So, LP, I'm totally going to share what exactly you said in that message. I hope you don't mind because it's pretty word for word. And I might cry while doing so, which is great because it's a podcast and y'all can't see me. She sent me a message and it said, I hope this doesn't come off weird, but I just noticed that I hadn't seen you in my feed recently, and I just wanted to check in and see if you were doing okay. I remember opening that message on my lunch break at work and just crying. And not crying because I was sad that she sent that to me. I was crying because I was so happy that somebody reached out to me when I could not bear to reach out to anybody else at that time. So, for those of you who have never struggled with depression, it might be really hard for you to understand that those of us who are struggling, we feel so helpless and so alone and so hopeless and bad about ourselves that we don't want to burden anybody else with our troubles and our struggles and our problems. So we often choose to suffer in silence because we don't want to burden another person. And so for her to reach out to me, especially since we weren't even that close back then, and ask me, "Hey, I haven't seen you on the internet. Seems weird. What's up?" That meant so much to me. So much. So again, LP, thank you for doing that for me. I really, really appreciate it. But I went on to tell her that, I wasn't okay and that I was glad that she reached out to me. And we ended up meeting up for coffee soon, and boom, a friendship was born. She helped me get out of the funk that I was in at the time, and guys, all it took was just sending me a message and asking how I was doing. It's crazy how such a small gesture of kindness impacted me so largely, right? Keep that in mind the next time you notice someone in your life start to slip away. So I know you're probably wondering, okay, well, I've reached out to my friend, but they're not responding to my text or my calls. Well, first of all, I knew you were going to ask that because it's very likely that that is actually what's happening. I know that there's been times when I was so depressed that I ignored people who were trying to reach out and help me. A lot of that was due to the fact that I didn't think I deserved to be helped. But if this is the case, and you're bold enough like I am, which I am pretty bold, but I say you just show up at their house. Or at least threaten to do so if they don't respond to your text. Be like, hey, I haven't heard from you. I'm not sure if you're alive. I'm coming over to find out. Be there in 30. Especially if it's on a day that you know they're not working. Or, during this pandemic, ain't nobody doing anything. So we're all basically home. Guys, just keep in mind that they're going to push you away when they need you the most. And don't let them win. Do not let them win that fight. They might not like you in the moment because you are pushing so hard to be around them when they just want to be left alone. But just trust me, they'll thank you later. They might cuss at you and say you're annoying right now, but they'll thank you later. Alright, so now that we've covered the ugliest side of bipolar disorder, next week we're going to dive right into mania. We're going to talk about my first manic and euphoric episode and what it was like when I was experiencing that in high school, what my actions were, how I felt, and what resulted from it. While feeling high on life sounds like an amazing thing, you might be surprised as to how it can affect you in the long run. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor. Take a screenshot of it, post it on Instagram, and tag me at distress2joyful_Bailey's Way, and include your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. Also, hit that cute little subscribe button in order to stay updated with the latest episode releases. But until next time, take it easy, stay grateful, and be joyful. Bye!